development and planning. We have to, I just can't remember, the list just goes on, and we're obliged to do all of those. And Mr. Penderville told us today that we're going to pay for all that out of the council's income. In other words, out of our money. So all you people here who are paying rates and who are struggling, you'll be glad to know that your rates will be going into developing competition for yourselves down on the brewery site. So I hope that makes you happy. All of you people who are desperate here for housing, it removes an option, a choice from the local authority of allocating some of our local funds to putting extra money into housing ourselves. In fairness today, and I always try to be fair, Colette Byrne did emphasise that the north side of the site has already been allocated for social housing, and that money has been allocated by, I don't know, is he the previous minister or is he still the current minister, but whoever, whether he's previous or current, acting minister, okay. So they still have the acting money. Well, I assume the money isn't acting, it's just the minister is acting, but anyway, they still have that money. And they're going to develop, they hope, about 70 social housing units on the north side of the site. In case, for the north side of the site, we mean the bit between the Brega River and Greensbridge. So that's the north side of the site. So they're going to put housing over there, and they have the money for that. Well, we'll do that in a minute. They're going to put housing over there and they have the money for that. But Colette Byrne also went to great pains today to explain that there is going to be a social element to all of this, and that the social element to all of this is going to be encapsulated, a lot of it, on the north side of the site. So they're going to put in a skate park there, and they're actually going to put in a kind of a teenage hangout spot there. And they're also going to put in perhaps goalposts and a basketball court, and they're going to provide river access, right? Now, I want you to think about that for a minute, and then I'm going to make the third point, and then I have one more point to make that should cover more or less where we are in the site, and after that we'll take a break. Ye have time to digest, and if any of the councillors or TDs want to take the mic as soon as they come back to explain all the lies I've told or what their position is, the floor is theirs, right? So, third point, we're on the north point part of the site. Colette Byrne, and I wondered why she was doing it, went out of her way to continually stress today the industrial nature of the site. And it's not something that has been stressed like that at any of the other loads of consultations and all that we've been at. They've always been stressing the heritage. But today, and I think any of us who were at the meeting will say the same thing, over and over again, it was the industrial, it was highly industrialised. And I was going, geez, where is she going with that? And then I remembered. Right? When they bought the site from the brewery, they bought the site from the brewery under certain conditions. And one of the conditions was that because it was an industrial site and was toxic, lots of it, that the brewery was going to clean up, Diageo were going to clean up the toxicity before they leave. And then when they had all that cleaned up, then they'd knock down everything, and then we would take possession of the site. And there was so much concern about that they actually wrote, as our last county manager, Mr. Mulholland, confirmed to me in a letter, in the contract with the brewery at that time, one of the provisos was that you can't put another brewery in there. And the other part of the proviso amongst everything was that Diageo were going to indemnify Kilkenny County Council to the tune of €750,000 in the light of environmental damage that might be discovered at some time in the future. Now, anybody who knows anything about environmental damage and toxicity and cleanups will tell you that 750,000 is a drop in the ocean. It's literally like going up there to the shop and spending €2 on a bar of chocolate. In the scheme of things, it's nothing. But yet it was put in there, and people don't write things in there unless they're trying to cover something or another somewhere. So the EPA came in And the EPA did all the stuff that they have to do, checking and everything, after Diageo said, we have all the place cleaned up now. And what they technically call that is Diageo went to the EPA and said, we want to surrender our license, right? Because you need a license from the EPA if you're going to do stuff that's going to poison people. So you need a license for that, so that you can be monitored and make sure that you're obeying the conditions that will poison people less, right? So the EPA went in and they checked out the site, and eventually they signed off. They said to Diageo, okay, you know, you've complied with most of the things we asked you to comply with, and we let you withdraw from the license. But, and they put in 3 provisos, right? And they said, on the north side of the site, and it's a fairly substantial block, where they're going to put the skate park and the young people's hangout and the houses, the EPA said, you really cannot have young children playing or having a playground or anything like that in this area because it's toxic. And they list the tribenzitol blah, blah, blah that I can't pronounce. That's there. They say to them, when it comes to doing any work kind of over around the well and 1 or 2 other areas, you really can't take the slab off of the surface because the toxic stuff is okay as long as it's down there. But if you take the slab off the surface, it's not really safe anymore. So you can't really do that. But as long as you're willing to work on the slab without ever going down anywhere, well, then it's okay. It's okay for putting offices on, how you build them. Oh, and that clearly explains then, I thought, why a few months ago the planning department told me that they were actually going to insist that all the buildings that would go on there would stand on piles, that they wouldn't actually have foundations. And I thought to myself, that's why. But even to sink piles, you have to dig down, don't you? So that's another one of those. They also said, as for putting things by the river and having access to the river, and Colette Byrne went to a lot of, she was wanted to facilitate people in the community as much as possible. And she fairly commented that the canoe club and using the river is a really good amenity and that it should be facilitated, and that they would hope that down around there they would have river access, and that is something to be applauded. But again, when you look at the EPA report, they tell you, be careful about going near the edge of the river, because when we were cleaning up there before, there's actually loads of asbestos in that, and you probably should try not to get too close to it or to disturb it in any way. So now, we have councillors voting on accepting a proposal and going into a partnership that ties them to doing specific things on specific parts of the site, which means that there's only the other part of the site, the northern part of the site, that's not, well, a fair portion of which is not being included in the ISIV deal, that's actually available to Kilkenny County Council to use. And it would appear from the EPA report that there might be concerns over whether or not that northern part of the site wouldn't be extremely limited in its uses and approaches to buildings, etc., etc. So that's that. And the final part of the whole thing that struck me was, I've been following this for a long time, and because I've been following it for a long time, I'm fairly well acquainted with it. And I was hugely surprised, and I actually felt terribly sorry for Colette Byrne today, because several of the things that Colette said were factually incorrect. And yet I know from the way she said them, she didn't say them to lie. She really didn't, because she was talking about it in the context of other things. The woman genuinely believed that her understanding of things on the county development plan and on the brewery site master plan were correct, and they weren't. And I don't blame her for that. She's only here a very short period of time. And so I feel sorry for her in a way, being left with this thing at this point, being so far advanced, and now trying to guide it through and kind of being stuck with it in a way is the impression that I'm getting, but maybe I'm wrong. And I did want to say that because I will be writing and posting about the things that were factually incorrect, such as, for example, the Watergate Theatre being in the brewery site and being included in the development plan as part of the land. I was surprised that she doesn't and didn't know, for example, that the market yard is called the market yard, that she didn't know that Horsebarrack Lane is Horsebarrack Lane. I don't blame her for not knowing those things to some extent, because she's new. And that just pointed out to me that she's at a bit of a disadvantage here. And so it would seem to me to have been another very good reason why those councillors that are in the council for a long time and that must have known that she was getting herself into a little bit of trouble with some of the things she was saying, really should have taken that into consideration and should perhaps have voted to defer the vote, to give the lady a chance to go back and revise, but they didn't. That was their choice. I'm not criticising them for that. I'm merely saying that as a human person, had I been in that position, that would kind of have been my view. Oh God, the woman is struggling. Maybe we should hold off on this and not tie her to something when she clearly is not 100% on top of it. And I'm not again suggesting that that's her fault for 1 second.